This program has been approved for one IDCEC CEU. To receive credit for this program, please submit your full name, IDCEC number, program class code, and your summary essay to ceu@iida.org. The program class code is located alongside the title of this program on the IIDA Academy page. For a certificate of completion to use toward another certifying body, please submit the same information to ceu@iida.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, to our third and final segment in this series, co-hosted by KI and IIDA. This Education Evolution series has been focusing on end users, actually, leading educators and designers. We've been exploring changes in education and designing for resiliency. And we're really thinking about how the world of learning, like so much in our world, has substantially shifted. And today we are focusing on technology. So welcome. I love all the greetings that are popping up too. Utah and Texas and Florida have all checked in. So this is how how today will run. We're in the welcome section right now. I'm Cheryl Durst. I'm the Executive Vice President and CEO of IIDA, and it really is my honor to greet you and to join KI and our panelists. We're going to have our moderated panel discussion following the welcome. Then we'll move into audience Q&A, and we'll do some wrap up and conclusion. You'll note that at the end of the program is where we will share the QR code for those of you who want to get continuing education credit for this program. I'd like to introduce my co-moderator for today's program, Jonathan Matta, who is the National Education Leader for KI. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Cheryl, it's great to see you. Thank you again for the opportunity to co-moderate these discussions with you guys.
Yeah, and why don't we've got such a context and content-rich conversation. Why don't we just jump right in and start with introducing our wonderful panelists for today?
Sounds great. I'm going to introduce Michael Mann. Michael is Senior Architect and Project Manager at Austin Independent School District, along with Barry Nebhut, Principal at Stantec. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Yeah, great, welcome. And then I'd like to introduce Theo Pappas, who is an Associate and Senior Planner with Stantec. Hey, Theo. And then finally, Ali Schneider, who is a Senior Interior Designer with Stantec.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here.
Everybody. All right. Well, we'd like to just take a minute or two, and it's become increasingly important for us all to check in with one another. And so let me just ask everybody, how are you all doing here in the middle of the week and traditionally what is for a lot of folks back to school month, although I know in parts of the country they started back in August. How's everybody doing?
Good. Still feels like the start of school for us here at AISD. Still working through some things, but we're doing well.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. And Stantec friends, you all are doing well?
Yep, we're very well.
Doing well.
Good, good, good. Well, I'm really excited. You're getting a big shout out from Dallas Fort Worth in the chat right now. And I'd like to ask the audience, we love all the commentary. We love all the questions that happen in chat. Hold on to those questions and for the Q&A at the end. And we'll try to grab as many of those audience questions as we possibly can. How about if we kind of just dive right in, and let me start with Barry. And thank you for joining us today, along with the Stantec team and your colleague Michael from the Austin School District. Let's set the stage just a little bit about this project. it's a different one. It's a little bit unusual in that we aren't talking about an individual project for a single school, but a master plan for an entire school district. Can you tell us, Barry, a little bit about the history of this particular project?
Yeah, in particular, the district has really been doing a very in-depth comprehensive master planning that began probably in 2014 or 2015, looking at all of their facilities across the district. And they asked us to really help them with one aspect of that, which is focused around their career and technology education, their athletics and wellness program, and their visual and fine arts program, their performing arts, and to really help them with three components of that. The first was identifying what was the district vision associated with those three programs. And then the second was to develop the ed specifications, or the actual details around the buildings and how the buildings respond to those three academic programs. And then finally, looking, the third component of that is looking at direct campus master planning for 16 secondary campuses across the district, 8 high schools and 8 middle schools. So that's really where the impetus of this project began.
That's great, Barry. That's incredibly comprehensive. And Michael, I'm really glad that you're with us today. So Austin's got a vibe, right? It doesn't just have a cultural vibe. There's an education vibe. There's this kind of thread that runs through kind of all things Austin. Can you share from the perspective of the school district, the importance of this project and what it means for both short and long-term change? And then comment, love to layer on in questions, if you can comment about how flexible spaces have kind of taken on a whole new meaning after this extended period of virtual learning that we've all just lived through.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me again. This has been a learning experience for me and for our whole team. Learned a lot from Stantec. As Barry mentioned, the district started back in about 2015. We started about 2015, did a ed spec rewrite, but didn't dive into CTE, fine arts, and athletics. Stantec came in, and what we learned from that is a progression of what we had already done with the ed spec rewrite and the flexibility that we were building in, and how can we continue that through those spaces. We also needed to update that ed spec. It had been quite a while, and bring it up to what we had done with the rest of the program, space program for the schools. I don't know if we're ready to dive in to the Empower Center part specifically, but that is sort of the epitome of flexibility. But we're seeing this throughout the school, throughout the space program, is this flexibility for different projects, for different classes, for different programs that are within the schools. I think that was the second part of that question. There's something about the cross-disciplinary aspect of that. You know, the different programs teaming up on things. There's a lot of, I do think the district as a whole, and I and the district keep talking about, you know, we don't want the tail wagging the dog, but the district really is, you know, top-down leadership, wanting to think outside the box. It's a kind of a cliche, but really rethink education. And it's not the teachers standing up in front of the room telling people what to do. It's project-based learning and things like that. And we're just trying to assist them and give them what they need. And I think we've come a long way. We've got a long way to go. This is a huge step in the right direction. We're all really excited about it. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but yeah, it's exciting for us. It's changing the way. I'll talk just a few more seconds and I'll stop. The schools we have opened, we've had 18 comprehensive projects, and those schools, you talk to the students and the teachers and the parents and the administration, and it is changing the way people think about education. It's having an impact on the community. So,
well, and Austin epitomizes thinking outside of the box, and I'm glad you mentioned the Empower Center that teed Jonathan up very nicely for our next portion of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Michael and Cheryl. One of the things we're hearing already is kind of this escalation of flexibility and collaboration across the district. Theo, when anything kind of lays the foundation for discovery, can you tell us a little bit about the discovery and the development process, what it was like working with the team at Austin International, and then how did you work with stakeholders? Did you guys work closely with them to develop the needs? Where were these things coming from? How did we start forming definitions, if you will?
Sure, Jonathan. Number one is I have experience with performing arts as well as space for education. And most of my career, I've toyed with the concept of fusion of those two ideas. The stage being the most flexible environment ever created, really, when you think about how quickly it can change. And of course, a learning environment. So I was eager to put this through to answer some of those larger questions of interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary education, and especially student agency, the students being able to kind of self-design their own programs and experiment with them. And so led to that conversation that we had during one of our discovery workshops with approximately 150 people. And I'm talking administrators, department heads, teachers, staff, students, and parents. And I brought forth this idea of considering a hyper-flexible space going forward. And this is what it got everyone excited and started talking about this idea of something that would really respond to what will really be needed in the next 25 years, and integrating that, of course, with technology and equipment and everything else.
Great. Allie, kind of building off of that from an interiors perspective, again, we've heard for years the escalation of flexibility. Now, everything Theo just shared, the vision for just like hyper flexibility. Mm-hmm. How did you approach working with the stakeholders? And how did that impact the vision and look and feel of kind of classroom models that you had to develop?
Sure. So AISD, they have a really fantastic structure in place for getting feedback. So like Theo mentioned, that discovery workshop. So that provided a ton of great stakeholder feedback. There's even campus advisory teams for each specific project that's in place. So once we were able to kind of gather all of the potential needs that this space is going to serve, this long list of various programs, CTE, fine arts, athletics, and kind of figure out, if this is a big, open, flexible space, furniture is going to be critical to making this successful. And so figuring out what are the key components that could be shared across several of those programs. Is there something that a CAD lab could use that also a cosmetology showcase could also use? What are some benefits of multi-use pieces of furniture? And then once we could kind of boil that down, we could establish some standards for that we could apply across the board. And then kind of just figuring out the logistics of like how to share the space well between different programs and how to use it as a resource that, not one program is going to have ownership of. And that kind of all tied back in with, you're asking how it impacted the vision for, the look and the feel of that space. When we had that really long list of various programs and different functions that this could serve, I think we're going to get into a little bit later, but we were able to kind of divide it into two buckets of kind of a studio and a lab type space. And I think that was kind of a driving factor in the look and feel, which we'll get into a little bit more.
Perfect. It's super intriguing to think about using the principles of stage design and applying that to a classroom. And so this upholds some principles around access and equity, and maybe challenging a little bit of a traditional power structure in a classroom. Barry, can I ask you, can you talk a little bit about student agency maybe in equity as it relates to the Empower Center and what this means for the Austin School District?
Yeah, I think the idea of, as we were having our discussions early on with administrators and staff members and really creating that vision, was this idea of student agency, that the students themselves driving where their education was headed, and not necessarily fitting that into a traditional environment or a traditional classroom structure that, kind of egg crate cylinders of classrooms, and allowing the students to define for themselves where they were headed with education. And that meant that not only are the students empowered for those types of decisions and actions, but the spaces around them needed to offer the flexibility to adapt and do that as well. So providing a center like the Empowerment Center that can be flexible to meet those demands, both today, but in the future as well, and allowing students to use those spaces and define how those spaces are used really becomes key to the entire instructional model that Austin ISD is seeking as it moves into its own future.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely essential that the schools provide this amount of flexibility and the ability to adapt quickly and easily to changing conditions and direction that the students themselves are going to demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's perfect. You're exactly right. Students are demanding that agency and that wherewithal. Theo, I know you're very passionate about this. Can you walk us through kind of the structure of the Empower Center and tell us a little bit about how these spaces function, and then maybe give us some information about the nomenclature. How did it come to be known as the Empower Center?
Right. First of all, we decided, I thought it really was a sense of harnessing the power of the student within the space. And we discussed this with our discovery workshop. And someone mentioned the word, the word power is too generalized. Let's make it more specific to the students. So the word empower was coined as the greatest way to really name this space, because it's empowering students to find new ways to experiment, to be scalable, so that we can try different types of programs and see how they work and adjust them. So that's how the whole name came to bear. The real evolution of this, as you can see in this diagram, is the notion of how it evolved in terms of from a fusion of a learning studio, which is usually a single story space that may have some storage of a certain size. And of course, the stage, which has wing space to serve the stage changing, and a fly loft, a third dimension, if you will, that allows further adjustment. And of course, that stage can host all kinds of aspects for the performance and change the entire environment very quickly. We fuse those two ideas together by saying, okay, let's employ two main keys here. And one is the staging areas, or wing space, if you will, for the learning space, the Empower Center, and the tech grid, a two-story space that allows the utilization of that third dimension, if you will. Because we've always talked about two-dimensional flexibility, but now we're actually adding the third dimension to play to really help facilitate that flexibility and adaptability, as Barry mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the basic components. They're very simple, really. We start with the fundamental core space, which is, like I mentioned, a two-story open space that can be dividable by acoustic partitions to reduce its scale and size. And then those staging areas, which are along the sides, very important to think of these as part of the learning environment, not just, quote, storage rooms, because they're active. There's large garage doors that open up. They can remain open, and it allows for facilitation of equipment and furniture back and forth that can happen within minutes and not months or years, or having a staff come in and move things for hours. It allows for that, as long as the furniture and equipment is compatible, allows that to happen. And again, the most important element are these tech grids, which is a winchable system, which can lower the whole grid down to waist level for servicing and maintenance and changing of whatever you want to put in that grid, whether it's lighting, power rolls, Wi-Fi, projectors, projection screens, monitors, that allows the teachers and students to plug and play and then loft it up to whatever level they want, or loft it all the way out of the way and not utilize it at all and create this large two-story space. So these are the basic components of this three-dimensional flexibility that when we fuse the stage idea with a learning studio. And what we developed with certain modules, basically the core module is a 3,600 square foot space that can be either one or two modules. In the high schools, we had toyed with the idea of having 2 modules together, which can be joined. But we wanted to give the design teams the flexibility on the staging areas, how they can engage each of those modules, so allow some flexibility in the design. But essentially, that's the range of a quarter to a half to a full to a double module of that core space that allows for the maximum flexibility.
Theo, what's the learning curve? How do students learn to use this space? How does an operations staff in the school district learn to use this space? How do educators learn to use this space?
Well, there are 2 complications here that require further development. And that is, number one is the furniture and the equipment has to be of a certain scale and size and mass that allows it to be moved easily. We're not going to have automotive or welding studios in these kind of places. But the idea is that students and teachers themselves should be easily be able to move things around, so you don't have to call a maintenance staff to do this all the time. So that's one of the things that's very important in terms of that flexibility and making sure it works. And so that's a key part of this, is to make sure that learning curve, there should be professional development with this as teachers learn how to use it. The other aspect of this, of course, it came up during our meetings, it's very important. How is this administered? How is it controlled? Who gets to use it? And the district was still working with that. It kind of centered on perhaps the library staff would be the fairest Switzerland, if you will, that would allow complete autonomy and not favor any one program, because we know that there's going to be great demand by all the programs mentioned, including core as well, to utilize this, and community functions. So those are the 2 aspects that are under further consideration going forward.
And I'll just add to that too, something that I've seen successful in other campuses with big flexible spaces like this is having like diagrams of pre-established arrangements of, A through F. And, if the students and teachers decide today we're doing arrangement C, then it kind of mobilizes all of the students. They know exactly what to pull, where to put it. So that could be one strategy for that learning curve of arranging the flexible pieces.
That's great. Great. Thank you for that. Jonathan.
Yeah, Michael, this is for you. And going back to kind of, I think you were pretty pumped up earlier to talk a little bit more about the why. When we listened to Barry obviously talk about, I like how he said it was essential, right? This is essential for the agency side of how we develop and grow humans. Theo just walked us through a little bit about around like the media architecture and how this is coming together or might come together. Can you go back to talking a little bit more about the fundamental importance to AISD? Why is this? Why are we trying to do hyper scalability, hyper cross-disciplinary instruction?
Yeah, I think we're realizing that I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that we did with, at least in my mind, and Theo, you can correct me if I go off the rails here, and Barry. But, I think about the CTE space that we were, the modules we were doing there. But the reality, and we kept thinking, well, CTE needs all this flexibility, or we adapt and change things. But the reality is every program, every bit of education in the district, you get teachers and administration coming up and saying, hey, we got this new thing we want to do. It's not just CTE or even just fine arts, it's the science department, it's some teacher wanting to do some creative thing. And we get these, in the construction management department where I work, we get these requests, right? And, I think about this, it's, hey, we've got a space now that when they want to introduce a class, they want to do they only have a few students that may be interested at first, but, and so we're not going to add on a whole new piece or renovate a space, or it doesn't make much practical sense anyway to renovate a space just for that. But this is a way to start those things up. So that's one thing, is every single bit of education, can benefit English department, mathematics, who knows what they can do with these things. We get all these requests. So it does allow that flexibility. I do want to touch on a little bit, not just the space, but the location of the space is really key to this in my mind. And it's sort of, I just realized, it's empowerment center, and it is sort of, as we went through those campus concept plans, Barry and Theo, this was central to the campus, right? I mean, and that was a big importance if we haven't hit on that already. it brings learning in front of everybody, right? So the students pass by. I can imagine, you know, that they'll come by and see these and gets other students excited about things. It provides a lot of opportunity for a vast array of students and things to do. We're excited about it. I think it's going to just give us all sorts of opportunity to do things that we didn't have before.
Oh, thank you. You know, I love quotes. And one of the things that you just said that I captured and wrote down was it brings learning in front of everybody. And I think that's a powerful sentiment when we think about that. Allie, when we think about that and we build on that, and then we distill it down to the most basic planning exercise when we think about space, which is kind of furniture, right? Can you share a little bit around the planning behind that, and what solutions might be looked at to bring all of this that we're talking about to life?
Sure. So as you're seeing on the screen, you can see a lot of the different arrangements we studied. And I think that was kind of critical, and a key component is, you know, figuring out what capacities were our goals for, you know, how many students do we think would be, you know, ideal to fit in this space in a lecture scenario, or if it is more of a breakout space, you know, what kind of configuration and what kind of capacity can we have there, and kind of just studying even the different ways to partition it off. Because when you think about, you know, that many students use like this, you know, you need ways that you can kind of barricade and have acoustical barriers, so that it functions the way you want and you can hear each other when you're talking. So there's these kind of built-in acoustic partitions that can be deployed to kind of break it into these kind of smaller half space, quarter space sections. And then we have, you're seeing on kind of the upper right corner of the screen, the kind of key furniture pieces that we planned for the space. And one of those is those magnetic marker boards that are going to serve as dividers as well. So we've got the built-in acoustic partition, we've got the mobile version of it, and that kind of helped us planning different furniture solutions. And it is, like you said, it's still being developed. You know, this is very conceptual at this point. We haven't assigned actual products, you know, to any of this. And I think it will be something that continues to evolve as, you know, there's going to be new programs that AISD is going to come out with that we're going to need to accommodate. There's going to be new products that hit the market that are going to be perfect for this situation. And, you know, I think we're going to have to constantly be looking and keeping this on, you know, on the forefront as new things are developed, especially with technology as well.
If I can add, the staging areas, we kind of try to think them out by all the different types of furniture that's collapsed or on carts or stacked, but there are a variety of options that could evolve there. We're looking at roughly 600 square feet for each of these to allow that. And again, the key aspect is a large rolling garage door. So you don't have to worry about trying to fit through narrow doorways so it can come in and out. And in some cases that may be left open, like the wing space of a stage. There's no law that says it has to be closed off. So that was developed there as a very important point to encourage that support. I want to make a challenge to Jonathan and his industry. Okay, what this really needs is an evolution of furniture that is light, collapsible, modular, whatever it can to really allow the easy movement. The whole concept relies on the fact that the teachers and the students can easily move things without breaking their hands or causing injury, and easily move things like on a stage to the side. So that's something that I think, I know there are a lot of types of furniture out there. There's, you know, we talked about platform stage, about podiums, and of course the various equipment itself, but I think it really needs to be something that can be light, but durable, easy to move and stack, how they stack or collapse on each other to allow that to be stored most efficiently. Those are some of the other challenges we've just started to talk about, because Allie's right. This is a conceptual work in progress where the furniture has to be vetted and tested as well as the other technology.
So Theo, I'll really quickly, we've long joked about the F word, flexibility.
Yes.
And I think when we think about integration and differentiation, right? And we think about a lot of the reimagination that has occurred and really continues to really need to occur. What I see most with this project is a really outside the box differentiation. And what you're going to help do is help another analogous industry, the furniture industry, level up as well, right? So I couldn't celebrate the challenge more. And I think you're spot on, right? I think you guys are helping everybody evolve with the differentiation associated with this project.
Great, that's wonderful to hear.
So Theo, to your challenge, I think I just heard #challenge accepted from Jonathan. So
Great,
there you go.
I'm a happy guy.
We'll have to revisit in a year. We have to revisit in a year. So Theo, this project is also very much about preparedness, preparedness for learning, preparedness for the school district around questions around equity. In the Stantec project documentation, there's actually a quote from Malcolm X. Education is the passport to the future. For tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. I'd love for you to kind of expand a little bit more about the conversations that you all had internally about what the Austin School District is actually preparing itself for and creating a model for school districts across the country.
Well, I have to say most of my philosophy on this came out of the CTE atmosphere where unfortunately for years we've had this stigma of anyone that was in career tech was, not normal or not traditional, or they can't hack it in school. And we've totally evolved from that stigma now where career technology education is a vanguard towards a future of opportunity, of relevance for students, helping enhance their self-esteem and achieve great things in terms of their career. Taking that even further, the idea of the Empower Center was really to allow the students to sculpt the space that they could use for their own direction of education. And even to create a place of immersion or safeness, if you will. It can be utilized for so many different things, and it's defined by the user, not defined by the building or the district or the other programs, but allows the generation of a seed corn of an idea of a future that can be cultivated by the students themselves, maybe an independent study group, maybe an independent class learning. So there's so many ways that this can support students who have an idea and say, I'd like to try something, and who knows where that can go? Who knows where that can lead? And there's no rigid formula, no delineation of extent or lines that you draw that you can't challenge. That's why I really feel it answered that call of equity and agency, because it's not defined by a traditional approach to education. And even the notion that a student can winch down the tech grid and put equipment up there we never even thought of. Put something up there and display, put works of art on there, who knows? There's so many applications, and it's accessible by the student. That's the other thing. The students themselves can do this and can work this space and not require a team of maintenance engineers or other people to help do this. We really feel it's important that the students can change the space themselves. That's the idea.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And again, that word empower is so important. It does give that agency to students, and it recognizes that not only do we not all learn the same way, but not all teachers teach the same way. And so this really does put power back in the hands of students and teachers as collaborators in learning. Right. And it becomes almost a stage set for whatever that learning needs to be or whatever that level of instruction needs to be.
If I can jump in real quick.
Yeah, please, Michael.
Sorry, Cheryl.
Yeah,
that
no
does
worries.
bring up a good point. It's also for, and maybe we're getting around to this, it's for outside people to come in, organizations, and assist with, and the AISD is doing this right now, but we need to do more of it. It's providing a space that who knows what trade organization or specialist can come in and have a space to do something that they would never have an opportunity, the students would never have an opportunity to see or experience. And then alongside with that sort of this is also, I could see it sometimes a community space as well. I just want to hint on that a little bit. And the furniture goes into that, there are times when it's not maybe directly education, but our schools are becoming more and more about not just education. It is primarily, I guess, but it's a community space, and it is spaces for every community. They need a different thing. Well, this can provide different things for different communities that need different things. So I kind of leave that there, but I didn't want to mention that. I thought it fit in well there.
Yeah, no, thank you. That community aspect, and community spaces are learning spaces. So that's, that's perfect. Barry, let me just ask you, what do you see as the overarching long-term benefits of creating these kinds of spaces? What do you see benefit both to not only the client, but to Stantec as a design organization? What were the benefits?
Well, I think the benefits, let's start first with the mission of the school district, which is to provide an education for its students for generations. When we talk about an educational facility, we're talking about a facility that's going to serve a community at a minimum 50 years, and in all likelihood far beyond that. So we have to design those buildings in a way that they're going to continue to serve an evolving clientele. Those students are going to face a different world, in the next generation than they are facing today, and even beyond that. So we have to provide the facilities that have that adaptability, have that flexibility, have those things that allow those facilities, that large investment that our community has made in these facilities, serve for that long. And we're going to see things like career technology. Those careers are going to change. You're going to see changes in how athletics and wellness are perceived and implemented, and they're going to need flexibility to meet those needs. And the same is true for the visual and performing arts. They are going to use these spaces in ways that in the future we can't even fathom how those facilities are going to be used today. But it really is important that we do that as our, to meet those objectives and provide facilities that serve our communities for multiple generations. And that's really what, I think that it starts with that. That is the key. It's delivering value to our community from day one throughout the generations and through the time period that these facilities are going to serve the communities that we're asking them to. And really doing that from Stantec's vantage point, that's our primary goal, is to deliver as much value as we can from the service that we provide to our clients. And we feel like providing this flexibility is the number one way of achieving that objective.
What did you all learn as a firm, Barry, in this project?
Oh, I think we're still learning from it. We've learned so much. It's hard for me to even pin down what is the number one thing that we've learned. I think that if I have to answer that, I have to say that there's never enough flexibility. That if we keep pushing the edge of that what is flexible and redefining what's flexible, we find that there are new boundaries that are there. It's kind of funny, as we were talking about quotes and things, I remember a song that was kind of popular in the late 1980s about space. And one of the lines in the song has something to do with, we all define space in our own way, mostly by using barricades, is the line in the song. And I really think that the idea is, let's define space not by using barricades. Let's create flexibility in our space by doing something other than building walls. And I think that that's really the objective, and one of the things that we're learning more and more as a firm, and I think as a profession, that we can define space and we can adapt space without infringement.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Thank you for that. Jonathan, do you want to kick us off with Q&A from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, here's a good one. Oh, I'm passing judgment on it. They're all good questions, but I think we talked a little bit about the escalation of flexibility, right? Barry just kind of, I'm not going to try and restate any of the beautiful things Barry just said. There's also been an escalation in technology in the past year, right? Has there been a focus, or will there be a focus inside of AISD on technology for special needs students?
I'll take that one. I guess it's directed.
Sorry, Michael, I should have just directed that at you.
That's okay. Yeah,
kind of laid you out there, buddy.
No, that's perfectly all right. And Barry, Theo might have some input on this as well. But for the district, absolutely. I do think we need to remind ourselves, but we have in my somewhat short time here, and I have to remind myself I haven't been here that short anymore. We have programs such as Archer's Challenge, which keeps special needs, whether it's whatever the need might be, at the forefront, whatever physical or need or otherwise. I will say that I'll admit I don't know directly on this space. If we have been able to think about that, it's still a work in progress. I do think it is a space that this special education program would absolutely use. It's not meant for any one program. Nobody would have ownership of it, as we've said. And as you were reading the question, I thought, yeah, there's a lot of things that could happen in here. It would make everybody inclusive to the campus, maybe feel more included. That's always a goal of the district, is Theo and Barry probably know, in our ed spec, our space program does not put any one group of people out at the periphery. It's inclusion. And so I think this provides a huge opportunity to continue and grow that concept, and that I think it'll be a huge benefit.
Perfect. Here's another question from an audience member. How often does or can the classroom reformat into a different instruction classroom throughout the week? And have you developed studies comparing a dedicated classroom in comparison to a multifunction flexible space in how often they're used?
I can answer that, and Allie can follow up, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Theo.
We have not done any studies other than looking how much space would be necessary, but the idea would be that this space could change from the morning to the afternoon. It does not, again, or it could be fixed in place for an entire term or a year. Double space, single space, it can be adjustable. Again, as Michael mentioned, and Barry, having a civic function in the evening, open it all up and then bring it back together for classes on the next day. The idea is that in order for it to be flexible by the minute and adaptable over time. And that's the idea we try to employ here. But there have been no motion studies. We haven't looked at, again, the furniture is a big part of it, the equipment, how does it collapse? How does it fold? How do we get out of the way? There have been no time studies to look at that. And I would definitely think that would be a certain challenge that we should really look at to see how workable these are. But it really is important to make sure that it can be changed relatively quickly, or the whole concept could be harmed if we can't do that. And Allie, I know you deal with that with mobile furniture all the time.
Yeah, and I think it would be a good idea to have some sort of mock-up of this. If we could take over a gym or a multi-purpose space or something on an existing campus, and just kind of try to do as best we can with the tech grid and kind of incorporating some of these infrastructure elements, but at least be able to test the furniture and how that could actually work in a similar size space. And then a part of that question was asking a comparison with how often classrooms are used versus how often this Empower Center is used. And I think something early on, there was a goal of AISD was 100% utilization of spaces, specifically their classroom studios. And so that's something that, with, cost of real estate and, all of that, it's just making it very efficient, making everything multi-use. So I think that's just kind of a goal, whether it's the Empower Center or it's a traditional classroom space. It's just being used all the time.
Yeah, and I think that once it's built, you're going to see kind of if we build it, they will come kind of a mentality in the district of once they have this space and understand how it can be used and the flexibility that it offers, it's going to be used. It's going to be programmed out. It's not going to have time that it's not being utilized. So I think that as the client, as the students, as the teachers become familiar with the space and how to use it, they're going to be using it all the time. I don't think it's a problem of having too much space that is programmed this way. I think in the long term, it's going to be a question of how do we get more space that's programmed this way.
The other question, other comment I'd like to add is this could replace existing fixed infrastructure that is not utilized all the time. A good example is a television studio, a broadcasting studio, green screen. All that could be brought in temporarily. You can have your reporting in your studio and then it can be put away rather than sitting empty for 6 hours a day. There are a lot of opportunities here to utilize this highly flexible space and then free up other space to be used for more permanent functions. So it can work both ways is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think real quick, just to add on to that, Theo and Barry, we've talked a lot about with Beth and Melissa about the cost of the space, because everything, it costs money. But to Theo's point, but what would you have to provide if we didn't have this space? I think there is, and what efficiencies are we gaining in a space that can be used for 4, 5, 6, 10 different things as opposed to building a space for one thing. So I would second that. Yeah.
One of the things I'm hearing is, again, this idea that design is an incredible teacher, right? So when we activate even just one of these, what it will teach us as we seek to scale culture change. To build on that, we do have a question around professional development. Not to say that we would ever approach professional development in a reactive way. Not that there might be anything wrong with that, but from a proactive perspective, any conversations around professional development to kind of accelerate it when we adopt 1 or 2 of these?
Barry, Theo, you want me to start or?
Yeah, go ahead. You start.
Fire away, Michael.
So this has come up with the new schools. Sorry if I keep relating back to what we've currently been doing, but it's just the easiest thing for me to do right now. I do see this as a evolution or a version of some of the things we've built on steroids, sort of. And we have had to come in and I'll just be honest. We've had to have a little bit of the cart before the horse and bring some professional development in afterwards. But we're learning a lot by that. And the professional development then started, okay, we need to come in before we have a new school. There is going to be continued professional development that's going to be needed. We can see it when we as we've been working on this and talking to some of the end users, if you will. Ty Davis, I don't know if y'all remember bringing him in. We weren't sure how the campuses and how the academic leaders were going to react to this, right? Barry and Theo, I don't know if y'all remember some of those conversations. And the great thing was bringing it to them. I think we are getting ahead of the game here. They had all these ideas. They were like, yeah, this is great, and we need to continue that as we develop these and as we actually get to build one of these things. The continued interaction with them and teamwork on what does this space really need to be, that needs to be at the forefront. I think I mentioned earlier, what's tail wagging the dog. I don't want to build something and go, here, go figure out how to use it. It does need to be, and it will be, and has been a collaborative effort. And it's not over, and it won't ever be over. It's learning, right? And we always learn.
I'm figuring that the first one built is going to be a beta test where we're going to have to learn. If a mock-up could be built, that'd be ideal to test that. Professional development could be created for teachers. The space itself can support professional development. That's the other thing. Normally schools want a large group instruction room of 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. You want community to use it. You want testing areas. You want to have a competition. You want to have some sort of gallery. That's why this space can accommodate. And I'm really excited about how the community sees its opportunity to use it. Not only working with normal community activities, but how they could be more involved with their children and their students in utilizing it as well. So, but you're right. Development of the professional development of how to use it, how to manage it has to go hand in hand with the development of the space. There's no doubt about it. It's not, you just don't throw people in the space, say, go ahead, do whatever you want, we'll talk to you later. I mean, you have to give people some instruction and learn that instruction through the beta testing of it. I absolutely would agree.
I really think that the idea of using this very presentation that Theo and our team have developed is really the basis for that professional development. It needs to be open-ended and flexible as well. But it does begin to create kind of an owner's manual, if you will, of how this space can be utilized in the future by staff. So I think that is a fundamental process that as these are implemented and distributed throughout the district of how rudimentally they can begin to use this space. And really after that, it's about their imagination and applying that in any way that they can and allowing the space to define how it is used.
And I'll add, I'm very excited to see how other architects and designers approach this. I mean, you could have an all glass with a lot of outdoor views. You can have skylights, use different materials. There's all kinds of 2.0 and 3.0 variations and evolutions of this could become over the years. This is just a start. It's just an idea. And I'm very excited to see how it develops because I see it, like I said, it could be applied to any learning environment, not just, you know, the 3 programs we talked about, but even core academic learning as well.
Well, I think on that note, thank you for that, Theo. I think on that note, we are going to want to come back to you all and learn a bit more. And once this space is realized, you know, leadership and learning are indispensable to one another. And I want to thank the team from Stantec and also Michael from the Austin Independent School District for truly leading the way in this, this innovative learning environment. And thank you to my co-host, Jonathan, and KI for being such a leader in education, and to every single one of you who've participated, whether this was your first in this series or whether you are joining us for the 3rd and final one. Thank you all for participating in this series, and we've learned so much. These are all archived and available to be viewed. But again, thanks to Stantec, thanks to the Austin Independent School District, thank you to KI, and thank you so much to the audience.